in the not too distant future.
Every year, Hollywood makes hundreds of movies. This is one of them.
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Gramercy Pictures invites you to the first big screen adventure of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
You hit something! You killed the Hubble!
Dr. Clayton Forrester figures he can rule the world if he deadens his subjects' brains by making them endure terrible movies. Exploiting his access to nearby satellite dwellers, Mike Nelson, and his robot pals, Crow T. Robot and Tom Servo, Forrester makes them watch a cheesy 1950s spaceship film. But when Mike and friends make funny comments throughout the movie, and others that follow it, Forrester's plan looks increasingly flimsy. So since I didn't review a certain movie this month, I had to scramble to find another movie to talk about, so that way we'd have at least 3 Blockbuster reviews this month. And so after racking my brain as to what movie I should talk about, I eventually landed on the Mystery Science Theater movie. And I think it's about time too, because a couple months ago when I did the video talking about movies based on trends, niches, and fads, I kind of wanted to talk about it. I should have talked about it there, even though it doesn't technically fall into a fad or a trend, because to this day, Mystery Science Theater does have a substantial fan following and people who still quote it and watch it to this day. But the reason I initially wanted to talk about it in that video was because, much like those other things, unless you were an avid fan of Mystery Science Theater, would you have gone to see this movie in theaters back in 1995? I'm not sure if that's the case, and I think Universal were aware of that, which is why Universal didn't put it in that many theaters back when it initially came out in 1995, and they advertised it as little as possible because they didn't have any faith in it. No, instead you want to know what they put all their chips on for the big summer blockbuster event of the year?
Don't call me babe.
Yeah, they wanted that to be the big success, and they put this off to the side. Now, that's not to say that the movie would have been a mega success compared to Barbed Wire, but it is just funny to see Universal get kicked square in the nuts because Barbed Wire failed so much, and they had so much faith in it, and yet this movie, they were just like, just put it in a couple theaters and make it like a limited release thing. In a way, it's kind of comforting knowing that studios have always made really stupid-ass decisions like that. And while I don't think this movie is that bad or anything, this is one of those movies where the behind-the-scenes stuff is actually more interesting than the movie itself. But before we talk about the movie itself or any of the shenanigans that went on behind the scenes, we gotta talk about the show that it was based on, because if you're one of the few people that doesn't know, Mystery Science Theater 3000 was a TV show back in the early days of Comedy Central, and originally, before it even went there, it was on cable access, but eventually the cable access channel went out of business, and then it got picked up by Comedy Central because they liked the kind of quirky humor that went with it. And the premise of it was you had this guy named Joel who worked for a couple of mad scientists, and they decided to use him for this experiment of theirs where they would try to break his sanity by subjecting him to bad movies. Two of which would be there watching the movies with him, and while they would show these crappy movies, they would be making commentary, or riffing the movie, as a lot of people call it.
You guys are all over the place.
Yeah, you're up in the mountains, you're in the studio, you're in a cave, you're in a shotgun shack, you're in another part of the world, you're on top of Old Smoky there. Oh, you're all over the place.
After a couple of seasons, Joel, the original creator and star of the show, eventually left to pursue other projects. And so they swapped him out with another guy, Mike, played by up-and-coming comedian at the time, Mike Nelson. And ever since then, he basically became the new main character.
Hey, did I hear you say you're managing a hot fish show?
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
It's great. I mean, how do you even get that?
Well, I just had a really good interview. You know, I'm looking for an overnight cook.
Are you serious?
I remember back in middle school, I watched the shit out of this show before I eventually moved on to discovering movie reviews and stuff like that on the internet. And, yeah, while there are probably some people who say, well, not every joke in the show was that funny, or oh, not every bit of it landed, I still think the show is immensely quotable. I think the show is very funny. And I think this movie definitely helped a new generation, especially for kids growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, appreciate bad movies and sort of helped establish this found love of watching crappy old B movies and making jokes with your friends, which is something I can greatly appreciate as someone who does that regularly. So at this point in the show, Mike was on for a decent number of years, and the idea of this show that was slowly developing more and more of a fan following, of course, Hollywood comes a-knocking and says, hey, people seem to like this, let's make a movie out of it. And one of the first studios that I guess went to them was Paramount, and what they wanted was a prequel movie. They wanted an origin story kind of thing. And there was a draft of that apparently written up. There was another draft that involved the mad scientists going to Las Vegas to show off their experiment about torturing people with bad movies at some mad scientist convention. Apparently this would have had special effects and cameos and stuff like that, but of course that got rejected because it seemed too expensive. So eventually Paramount dropped it, and I guess once the show moved over to the Sci-Fi Channel, Universal got involved, and Universal executives said, hey, we'd be interested in making a Mystery Science Theater movie. So they ponied up a budget for them, and apparently they used that budget well, and it does certainly show in the movie. I mean, they do recreate the sets from the original show, but make them grander scale, and they do have a lot more impressive practical effects going on.
The Cubs lost again. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, why, hello, Mike. Everything working fine on the old satellite of love today?
But saying that, they don't do away with any of the classic puppets or any of that from the original show. Those are still well intact.
Crow, you big dope. You can't tunnel through space.
Come, boys. We must confound Jerry at every turn. Oh, you'll breach the hull.
But here's the thing. Here's where Universal gets involved. Universal said, okay, we'll let you do a movie where you get to riff on a movie. Because despite some interest being in a more story-based film focusing on an actual plot, ultimately it came down to, look, this is a movie based on a show about a bunch of guys making jokes over bad movies. So Universal caved and said, okay, fine, we'll let you do that for the crux of the movie. But they set down some ground rules for them. Those rules being, it couldn't be in black and white because according to a bunch of executives, kids these days in the 90s didn't like black and white movies. Another big rule was it had to be a certain length, and the third biggest rule was it had to be a movie that Universal owned. And honestly, considering Universal were paying for the movie, that's more than reasonable, I would say. The other one's debatable, but that one, it's like, okay, yeah, if it's a Universal-made movie, obviously you gotta have them watch some kind of movie that Universal made. Unfortunately, that also put a major roadblock for them because a lot of the movies that they would watch were crappy, low-budget B movies that were in black and white. So, I don't know, even if they figured, hey, most kids these days don't care about old black and white movies, you think they'd also respect the fact that the show had an audience, and the audience was more than willing to put up with old black and white movies. But this comes into play a little bit later, especially when we get to talking about the movie's release. So after looking through a bunch of different movies that fit Universal's guidelines, they ultimately came to the conclusion that they would watch and riff the movie This Island Earth.
This island Earth can be yours if the price is right.
Which is a pretty well-known B-movie from Universal back from the 50s, and I guess I'll have to talk a little bit about the movie itself because it is a crucial part of the film. And this does lean more into one of the bigger problems that this movie has. Again, not to say this is a bad movie per se, but one thing that definitely adds to the confusing factor of this film is This Island Earth really isn't that bad of a movie. I mean, it's cheesy. It's certainly a very cheesy old 50s sci-fi movie. You know, you got a main character that has that kind of 50s Bing Crosby radio voice.
You boys like to call this a push-button age. It isn't, not yet. Not until we can team up atomic energy with electronics.
You have aliens that are obviously people with prosthetic foreheads that make them look like Jimmy Neutron in live action.
I'm afraid I don't know the gent.
I'm not an alien.
Do you notice the peculiar indentations in both their foreheads?
No.
And then later when they're supposed to be on a spaceship going back to their home planet, they're all running around in these 50s-style jumpsuits.
I'm sorry that our visit below had to be terminated so dramatically, but time allowed for nothing else. I can assure you we mean you no harm.
And then later on, they end up on a planet that's more than obviously a matte painting.
Looks like Dr. Seuss designed their planet.
Oh, they're flying into a Roger Dean album cover.
They're very into yes on this planet.
And in the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie, they're like, oh shit, we have to have something happen. We have to have some kind of monster or creature show up and attack our heroes. So they have this thing called the mutant.
Leona Helmsley!
I'm sorry.
Owie.
I'd hoped to prepare you somewhat beforehand. This is a mutant. We've been breeding them here for ages to do menial work.
Why?
All the while, the entire first half of the movie is a lot of people just kind of standing around in office rooms talking.
Dr. Adams here has been working along the same lines as you have. Perhaps just a step behind you. Although I might add that both of you are way ahead of anyone else in your field.
Suppose when I do, I find I can't go along with you.
Can we still go out sometime?
Naturally, we'll expect you to be discreet about what you've seen here. Otherwise, you're free to leave, Dr. Meacham. As free as air.
And the thing is, hearing all that, you'd assume that, oh man, this is some really crappy old movie from the 50s. Yeah, they should totally tear into this one. But even at the end of this movie, they're like, this was far from the worst movie we ever sat through. They have a big party to celebrate it.
Your spirit feeling broken?
Heck no, we're fine, Dr. Forrester. In fact, we're just having ourselves a little Metaluna mixer.
And I guess you could say that's part of the joke, that the mad scientist, Dr. Forrester, at the beginning of the movie is laughing to himself saying, oh, this is the movie that'll finally break Mike's spirit.
But perhaps this movie will drive him to the breaking point and crush his soul. And then I'll unleash it on an unwitting public, and then I will rule the world!
This will be the movie that brings humanity to its knees, and yet it obviously isn't. It's probably one of the better movies they talked about. I mean, it's silly. It's certainly silly. It's boring in a lot of spots, like a lot of 50s movies were, and let's be honest, even the good 50s movies, they have their dry spells. Come on now. But that being said, This Island Earth still isn't that bad of a movie. I mean, yeah, cheesy and silly maybe, but it's not bad enough. It really is a shame that they did an episode on Manos: The Hands of Fate long before this, because all things considered, Universal probably could have gotten the rights to Manos. If they didn't do an episode on it earlier, they could have made the whole movie be about that, because Manos is allegedly the worst movie ever made, and it's in color, and it fits that crappy 50s movie criteria, you know, and has a namesake of worst movie ever.
Yes. That's what the game is. Yes. Yes.
Do something! Gah.
I mean, shit, if they weren't going to talk about a movie from the likes of Ed Wood, some of which they have already talked about in one way or another, Manos would have been the right answer, but they already did Manos in a previous episode. So yeah, if they hadn't already done Manos, that probably would have worked a lot better for a movie. Like, oh shit, this is building up to them watching the supposed worst movie ever made. But they already talked about Manos. Universal probably didn't own the rights to it. Probably didn't want to buy the rights to it just for this one movie. One thing that confused me, and this plays into another reason why This Island Earth probably wasn't the best choice, was This Island Earth isn't that long. So, you know, whereas they would typically watch movies that were around an hour and a half, this makes the movie feel a lot shorter. It makes the theatrical movie version of a show where episodes were already an hour and a half or so long. You know, it makes this movie clock in at around like $1.14. It's really not that long. But despite the fact that This Island Earth isn't that bad of a movie by Mystery Science Theater standards, the thing that helps elevate this movie and definitely keeps it entertaining is the fact that there are plenty of good jokes.
Captain's log. A bunch of our ship fell off and nobody likes me.
Well, suddenly I have a refreshing mint flavor.
Now it's time for the Brack Show. Da-da-da-da-da-da. It's the Brack Show. Starring me, I'm Brack. It's the Brack Show.
Into the Weenie Mobile. Weenie Man away.
Cal, I'm begging you, don't go.
Cal,
Please,
Cal,
don't
I'm stuck up.
Blowing the cylinder.
Inserting the breakfast pastry.
We won't start cracking the whip on Meacham until tomorrow.
Then I ram my ovipositor down your throat and lay my eggs in your chest. But I'm not an alien.
Captain's log. I've lost my toupee and girdle and I can't leave my room.
Hell, one of the best gags in the movie is them riffing the names of the credits of their own movie.
This is Orson Welles. A good cast deserves another mention.
In the event that the first assistant director is unable to fulfill her duties.
It was stuff like that that I really appreciated. It's like, man, that is the kind of thing I would want out of a Mystery Science Theater movie. And by Jove, they actually did it. So yeah, the movie's biggest flaw is that This Island Earth really isn't that bad of a movie, but it's elevated by the fact that despite that, they still make some pretty good jokes, and they even lampshade the fact that it's not the worst movie ever made in the movie itself. Another thing I liked that they carried over from the show was that every once in a while they would take breaks in between watching the movie. They'd do little skits that would either parody the movie or relate to some kind of external plot line that was going on at the beginning of the episode. In this movie's case, I like the fact that they tried to work in this theme of them trying to get out of watching the movie or trying to find some way of getting back to Earth, because that was still a big part of the show's plot. I really like that. It really feels like they were trying to have an actual story going on outside of, hey, let's just watch a bad movie and make jokes about it. They'll be watching the movie and there's a piece of technology that characters are using, and then one of the bots will be like, hey, I have that. Hey, why didn't you tell us before? We can use it to get back to Earth.
Oh, my interocitor's way nicer than that one.
You have an interocitor?
Sure, don't you?
Well, come on, we can use it to get back to Earth.
They go to Servo's room because Servo apparently has a piece of technology that's in this movie, and then they communicate with one of the aliens that's apparently in the movie. Not actually played by one of the actors. It's supposed to be the same species of alien with the giant foreheads.
Is Exeter there? Nah, him and Brack went down to Headbutt Days with Shelley. I got to meet him in the beer tent in about 15 minutes, so I got to get going.
Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. When it comes to movies based on TV shows, you want the movie to have a much grander scale. You look at something like, you know, the SpongeBob movie, for instance. Just throw that out there. That didn't just feel like an extended special that went to theaters. That felt like a real feature-length film. It went above and beyond the actual limits of what they did on the show. And there are plenty of movies that are based on television that do that, and they do it very well. But there's also plenty of examples of that where it just feels like you're watching an extended episode of the show, and there's no reason for it to go to theaters. For example, there's the Simpsons movie, which I didn't even think was that bad, to be honest, but it's one of those things where The Simpsons was on for like 18 years at that time. It felt like they've done literally everything. So then you watch it, and while they did try to have, you know, a bigger, larger-than-life plot for that, it still just felt like, you know, fucking Simpsons has been on for 18 years. What else can they possibly do? Like, how is this any different than just a multi-part episode of the show? Which I guess you could say they kind of tried to lean into. There's another example, and I thought it worked much better, and that's the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie. They knew that it was basically a glorified TV movie that just went to the theater, and they didn't give a fuck. I think it especially worked for Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie, and I would say I kind of like that it worked in this movie's favor, because yeah, it really did just feel like a big budget version of the show. One thing that really sucks about this movie, and hearing all the studio meddling that went on behind the scenes, man, it really shows, especially at the end of the film. As apparently the original ending of the movie, they were supposed to communicate with the mutants, which then goes after Dr. Forrester. And there was also supposed to be some kind of scene where Forrester is messing with the oxygen on the ship, and you think that Mike is about to die, but then the bots save him. It was supposed to be really dramatic and, you know, something that was actually kind of serious for a show like this, but yeah, apparently Universal said, no, don't do that. They scrapped that, so then they had to reshoot a more upbeat, happy kind of ending. And it really makes the movie feel anticlimactic. In fact, in a lot of ways, it makes the movie feel just as anticlimactic as the climax in This Island Earth. And speaking of studio meddling, that also went to some of the jokes, as apparently Universal were constantly breathing down their necks and telling them certain jokes that they couldn't do, or telling them, no, that's not funny, no, instead do this. No, take that joke out, no one's gonna get that, put this in instead. And while the jokes in the movie aren't that bad and feel like they're right at home with another episode of the show, with the biggest exception being, since it's PG-13, they can say shit uncensored.
What kind of shithole planet is this?
The sidebar, I will admit, I'm kind of glad they stuck to PG-13 because the original show really wasn't that raunchy at all. So, if anything, yeah, if you're gonna make a movie based on Mystery Science Theater, PG-13 is the way to go.
Jeez. What a dickweed.
But that kind of studio mentality of, hey, this is a show that was built on its own charm and has its own fan base, and people seem to appreciate it for what it is. And then the suits just come on in, they waltz in there, and they just tell them, hey, no, we know this stuff way more than you do. It's that kind of shit that really pisses me off. And unfortunately, the worst thing to happen was when they did a rough cut of the movie and they sent it out to test audiences. And like always, test audiences didn't like the first pass-through of the movie, so they demanded more reshoots, more re-edits, more rewrites. Like they always do, they rounded up, I don't know, random people off the street or people they typically get for these stupid test screenings. And of course, most of the people didn't understand it because they weren't familiar with the original show. Of course they weren't going to understand it. But Universal just chalked it up to, oh, that means we have to do reshoots, we have to have re-edits, we have to have rewrites. And it's like, fucking, you're not showing this to the right people. So of course they're not going to get it. It doesn't really hinder the movie that much. There are jokes in the movie here and there that don't land, but for every 1 or 2 jokes that don't land, there are at least 8 that make up for them because there are some really funny jokes in here. But man, I gotta say, going down that rabbit hole and learning about the history of this movie and just hearing about the studio meddling, it's just another example of why, as somebody who watches movies regularly and loves the art of film and filmmaking, you gotta fucking hate the studio system, man. There's just so many examples of movies that are hindered because a bunch of out-of-touch suits go to them and say, no, make the movie like this. We want the movie done this way. No, you have to do it like this. This is what we want. It's like, yeah, I get it. The studios, they're supplying the money. I get it. You have to occasionally play ball with them. But it's like, there's no give and take. It's just the studio constantly badgering them and demanding that they do it a certain way that's completely outside the realm of what they originally wanted with the project. So that part just kind of pissed me off a little bit. They released it through a subsidiary company of theirs, which was Gramercy Pictures. And instead of promoting this movie, they put all their chips on Barbed Wire. And so once Barbed Wire sank like a stone, when this movie was inevitably released, they just released it in very limited theaters and they barely did any promotion for it. Apparently they had a good time making the movie, especially when it came to stuff like the set design. It definitely gave Best Brains all the freedom in the world to do whatever they want with making more updated versions of the sets from the show. And stuff like that certainly shows with the skits in the movie, the storyline segments that aren't just the riffing segments.
Shoestring potatoes. Hey, a can of Handingers. No interested in spirographs. I know it's around here somewhere.
This isn't that bad of a movie. It's certainly a good episode of Mystery Science Theater. It's definitely a bigger budget version of that. And I mean, hey, if you're a fan of the show or you're getting into the show, why would you not want to see a bigger budget version of the series? If you want to see them watch an actual movie instead of the typical low-budget schlock they typically watch, this time you get to watch them watch what a lot of people call big-budget schlock, because this was a Universal movie, and Universal really wanted you to know that.
Doesn't the fact that it's Universal make it international?
For its intended audience, Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie, it'll definitely leave the fans satisfied, and apparently critics liked it. Apparently Siskel and Ebert liked it.
I think that it's pretty funny, and yes, maybe after an hour I would have been satisfied, but in that first hour I was laughing pretty hard.
I like the movie. I just couldn't watch this every week. It gets a little tired after a while.
Okay, you only have to watch it once.
But anyways, that does it for Blockbusters show in June of this year, so look forward to next month where we're going to be doing 2 movie reviews, and I got an anime review coming up. It's for a show that didn't go for super long. It only went for 1 season. It's only 12 episodes. But you're going to have to guess what that is until next time. So, yeah. Until next time, guys, I'm Adam Sykes, The Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Normal view.